does it feel to be free? Why don't you try it yourself? The gate opened on me.
Vulnerable, adjective, capable of being easily hurt or harmed physically, mentally, or emotionally. Open to attack, harm, or damage. Assailable. Most often, this trait is treated as a bad thing, either as a weakness to exploit or a chink in the armor to hide. Perhaps in a physical way, this is correct. Exposing your body, making yourself naked to the world, is an invitation for something malicious to sink its teeth in and do what it pleases. When people imagine vulnerability, they in turn are imagining the potential consequences of that moment, and are then brimmed with fear over the idea. No one wants to feel as if they are at the mercy of others, to have their sense of control taken. To preserve the ego is to preserve the self from danger, after all. To create a bailey bearing walls so high, bricked so dense, made so impenetrable that no one can bring harm to the moat of the self. This is the mentality that modern life in the city encourages. The weak are trodden upon by the strong. The powerful exploit the powerless. An intangible yet palpable gulf lies between person to person as they have retreated into themselves in order to not be hurt again. But humans cannot be an island. We're social animals. We rely on bonds to remain healthy and sane. How can you connect to others if you've walled yourself so far away from the people standing at the gate? How can you survive in a world that punishes bonds? When one rejects vulnerability, it is often in response to having been harmed in a vulnerable state. You don't wake up one day and decide to wall yourself off. Something has happened that has told you being open is dangerous, that the goal is now to become invulnerable, incapable of being harmed. It's only natural to deter pain and languish in comfort. It's both our barometer for safety and our struggle to survive. But in the effort to make oneself invulnerable, you shun vulnerability. Anytime one has made the decision to lay themselves bare, to express their softness, there's at least one person making a snide comment of how foolish or weak they are for doing such a thing. A cycle that seeks to crush out that weakness through social pressures or true violence. We see them every day. We see this all the time in social media or real life. But these so-called invulnerable personas have not truly become invulnerable. They have become fragile, inflexible, rigid in thought and idea. To make the self invulnerable has now created possibilities for your fortress to crack. You can't look outward or inward with a body tensed on alert. You're trapped constantly scanning for threats or looking for openings until something outside of your rigid gaze crashes into you, breaks you, fragments you. Then you go about, cracks in your foundation, the jagged edges of your heart and mind primed to strike or ridicule, in a faux show of strength and resilience. You are solid, immovable, intangible, yet you are so broken. You are trapped by the very instincts that are meant to keep you safe in a situation of danger. To be vulnerable is to accept that there will be a risk of harm dealt to you. Those willing to open themselves up, be cut, yet continue to do so are not fools. They know full well what they risk, but prove courageous to open the gates to their heart and mind anyway. The richness of friendship and carving of community cannot be done if all have retreated into themselves, unwilling to risk harm or heartache. This is what births so much conflict within the city, within the characters of Project Moon's universe. This desire to be strong over seeking connection, this need to have safety over solidarity, this cycle of pain and violence that so many cradled within the city's bounds have shrugged their shoulders and accepted as truth, their apathy having killed their desire to connect. However, to walk, you must accept that you will fall. To breathe, you must accept that you will choke or be short of breath. To really, truly live, you must accept that you will hurt. Because what awaits past the hurt is far greater than any wound that could ever be dealt to you. Hi, if you've been enjoying the video so far, would you care to subscribe and maybe comment? We have a Discord server as well if you're interested. Thank you so much for your attention. Now, let us look upon those who refuse the call of vulnerability. Let's look upon the antagonistic characters of Project Moon's world. Ayin was a young man who had given up the chance to join a wing in order to follow Carmen's pursuit of the cure of what was deemed the disease of the mind. He was one of many who would be pulled into aiding with Carmen's cause. He and Carmen would have deep one-on-one talks with each other about life and reincarnation. He surely believed in her vision and wished to achieve it. But then, Enoch died in the experiment. Lisa, within her grief, would throw barbed words she didn't truly mean. Carmen would fall into a depression because of this, one that Ayin did not take the time to address until it was far, too late. Carmen was bleeding out in the bathtub. The light of the project, his senior, the person whom he admired, brought to near death by her sullen state. Then Elijah died, then Gabriel lost himself, then Giovanni fell into a coma, then Lisa and Danielle and so many fell to their grave, then Kelly succumbed, then Michelle ended her life, then Benjamin. Ayin always came across as a guarded person, but the succession of tragedy after tragedy made him erect thicker walls, pushed him deeper into the trap of the self. His efforts to be invulnerable broke him time and time again. By the time Lobotomy Corp became a wing, he was truly and wholly shattered. Only the succession of the Seed of Light project giving him any means to go on, Carmen's ultimate wish fulfilled before he was allowed to pass. Only within the loops, as X, would he begin to open up to the Sephira. One by one, he would face his sins, the people he failed, the people he allowed perish or suffer. It was only when he allowed himself the vulnerability of seeing each of them for their true selves, facing himself, and in turn pushed them and himself to seek a future beyond the hell carved of the loops, that he could succeed the project, that he could let go and vanish into the light. But there was someone he didn't reconcile with, one singular person left unheard. And oh, the tragedies that would unfold as a result of this. Angela, a machine made of the mind and in the image of Carmen, yet she could not be her. She couldn't truly be the woman that Ayin admired. Within his grief, her form was a perversion. He could not look at her, acknowledge her, love her. And that was the very thing that would lead to her act of rebellion, taking the light before it could finish shining down upon the city, and in turn left the seeds forming within all of humanity naught but unstable potentials. A thank you, a mere drop of acknowledgement of her suffering and efforts could have avoided this outcome. A simple facing of the one person he denied the most. Thus did her one selfish wish to live lead to a stream of suffering, one that would strike one man in particular amongst a sea. Roland, a grade 1 fixer unable to emigrate to a nest with his pregnant wife because of his involvement with the smoke war, would arrive to the site of his wife's death after a job aiding Olivier. Angelica, the person who opened his world and came together to form a family, was gone, slain by the pianist, distorted by the dark days. These two attempted to fortify themselves in order to become invulnerable, to tell themselves that death and suffering were only natural, that the idea of opening to others about their hurt would only result in more, that they must harden their hearts and do what must be done in order to find the ending of their stories. Yet they had moments of vulnerability anyway, even amongst the days of killing guests. Angela and Roland still shared parts of each other, wishes, history, fondness, friendship. Even Roland would unknowingly grow to hope that Angela would turn away from this path toward making herself human, to perhaps reconsider so that he did not have to do what he felt must be done. But the day would come when he would finally face her with intent to kill, donning his mask and provoking her as if to make her do the same, as he couldn't bear doing this to someone he grew genuine care for. And so he closed his heart and hid his face. It was only when the two of them were brought down to even level that the path of whether to harden their hearts to indulge in their grudge or let them reopen reconciliation was laid bare. Library of Ruina gives the unique perspective of showing us what would happen if either of them would kill the other, and each path leaves them a broken, lonely figure either dead or dying. A miserable end for those who would choose invulnerability only to then be shattered by killing a dear friend. Despite everything, they were always human to each other. Within the true ending, the two of them reconcile and choose to keep their heads up and keep moving, together, towards a future that thwarts the head and the twisted environment it permits. Sonya is a young man who stands as the current leader of the Eurodeve, a visionary who desires to bring change to the city. But he wishes to do this from an almost messianic position, a savior come down onto the populace to save them from themselves and birth a new world. We don't know much of Sonya's inner workings as of currently, but it can be said that his bearing of the sign and the destruction of his hometown by the middle have come together to form his present-day logic. His form of invulnerability: you cannot usher change if you are not special. If you are not of remarkable make, you cannot do anything. This is the lie he tells himself in Rodion, the lie that informs his actions, be it over a game, a meeting with the director, or even being in a position to be reminded of his trauma. He has resolved himself to be in control of the situation no matter what. He cannot be wrong, he cannot be contested, he cannot be average, because average is useless to him. You cannot be of the average and also lead. Effectively, he has risen to the role of a leader while refusing to allow anyone in. He isn't even with them as they go about spreading his message. He has forsaken true connection for the path to ascension, almost a god to his own people. Kromer was a young woman of the Inquisition, bearing the title The One Who Grips. Kromer has claimed to bear disgust towards prosthetic-bearing people since she was a child, implying she had been indoctrinated by these ideas of humanism from a young age, or perhaps even since birth. Given she is poised as likely being rather young or even the youngest among the ones who grip, that may have rooted a seed of loneliness within her. But due to her upbringing, she cannot engage with others, even those of like mind, as proper equals. So when she engages with Sinclair in school, likely already having had her eyes on him, as he was the son of the very people that they appeared to be targeting. But in doing so, she finds out he in fact bears a similar ideology to her own. For a child who has likely felt loneliness and distance from even her own colleagues, finding someone completely unattached to the Inquisition to have as her own must have been a dream come true, an utterly enthralling concept. In her own twisted way, she engages in rites of companionship, speaking to him often, asking a favor of him in return for what she believes he wishes, sparing his life and desiring his company. She does truly appear to care for and desire for Sinclair's friendship, but she cannot lose this instilled invulnerability that prompts her to suffocate him, likely as she herself has been suffocated. Within their battle in Canto 3, she distorts into a being that seeks to meld others into herself, to be herself. Her desire for connection distorts into a desire for sameness within the rigidity of invulnerability, unable to see Sinclair as his own person, but rather something to meld within her grasp. In the end, she never gets to see the error of her ways, so hardened in her ideals that she is then slain for it. Dongrang was a young man who was part of the original League of Nine Literatures. The group assembled with the intent of sharing hobbyist inventions and partaking in the joy of creation without profit or advancement. But even so, that wasn't satisfying to him. Long before his betrayal, he had nudged a suggestion or considered the idea of making their inventions public knowledge. The others didn't speak with much impression on his desire to help sick animals, and seemingly nothing he offered piqued the group's attention. As soon as Yiseng presented Yon Sim, he pressed with recommendation for him to expose it to the public. But Yiseng refused. He wished for it to remain as merely a fun project that he could present to his friends. The cracks within Dongrang, his silent frustration, only truly began presenting themselves with Nulin's suggestion that an invention will not be considered unless it has an obvious use, and he failed to make anything that would meet this criteria. Insecurity would continue to fester in his heart, unspoken and unseen. When that official notice came to the League and prompted them to erase their creations to preserve their intent as private, recreational crafts, Dongrang was the most vocally against this idea, expressing that perhaps T-Corp would approve of them, that maybe even the invention, his invention, could benefit the city as a whole, instead of remaining as mere playthings. In a sense, his attempt at invulnerability would lead him to make the first betrayal of the League. The deviance in ideology and a desperate grasp to continue his advent to prove himself. When his creations were burnt, he did not seek comfort. He pivoted away despite Yiseng's attempt to reach him, his attention toward K-Corp's singularity. It's only natural. The only inventions spared were the glass window and the mirror, the works of Yongji and Yiseng. His invention was useless and rendered obsolete by K-Corp's singularity. With his later selling out of the League in order to position himself in K-Corp, he had given a technology not of his making, the glass window, to cement his place, to become useful. But Dongrang lies to himself toward the end of the canto, the lie that breaks him, that he feels any guilt or shame for what he's done to get where he is. He clings to the idea of the yellow calf as a means to tell himself his actions were selfless at heart, but he knows within himself this isn't true. He did not want to change the world or improve the lives of others. That was the lie he told himself to hide from his own feelings of inadequacy. He wished to be important, to fill himself, even at the cost of others. and thus is why he would rather slaughter the past to free the way for his future, to erase all attachments to that soft-hearted young man who desired to aid animals. Ahab is an older woman who is the captain of the Pequod, a whaling ship of fixers. You don't become a whaler unless you have something to escape from. The profession isn't taken up so lightly with the parasitic nature of the whales and all of the other dangers that roam the lake. A group of vulnerable people sailing on a ship for months or even years at a time with no one but each other. The perfect environment to create a cult of personality for a woman such as Ahab, who presents herself as a strong, unshakable leader that will triumph in her hunt for the point of her obsessions. This was the ideal setting to reinforce her means of invulnerability. The shield of unshakable truth. She is the captain. None, if any, feel driven to question or challenge her, as she barks her perceptions onto reality while all the crew can hope is that the voyage ends, so that they may be able to press on with their lives elsewhere. None may die, as she has decreed such. Her crew is not made up of like-minded individuals working together toward a similar goal, but rather extensions of her will, extensions that she may do what she pleases with, extensions that she's willing to twist and hurt and manipulate if it's in service of her divine mission. That which has become the foundation of her being, slaying the pallid whale, as the pallid whale is the culmination of all the world's evils, and so that makes Ahab the champion of the world's virtues. Though she did not distort, her acquiring of ego is merely a furthering of how lacking in doubt or self-awareness she is. A full commitment to this delusion is what defines her foundation, her walls. But what happens if she were to slay the whale? What's next? What is her life beyond the whale? It's simply nothing she has ever considered. It's something she can no longer imagine. The whale is her only attachment and will to keep going in this life. Catherine was a young woman of Wuthering Heights whom lived alongside Heathcliff for most of her life. She loved Heathcliff as he loved her. However, the two were born in different worlds. She was born of a rich family, and he of the streets. If it weren't for the fact the two were being raised in the same home, the two of them meeting and falling in love would have been both unlikely and undignified. Catherine allowed the pressures of social standings to get in the way of speaking her true feelings to Heathcliff, resorting to communicating her desires through confusing metaphor instead. If he truly loved her, he would know implicitly, right? But that isn't how you commune your interest to someone you love. Shutting your true feelings away and resorting to vague signals in hopes they understand what you mean as they stand outside your gates is not connection. It is invulnerability. And through this invulnerability is what shatters her heart when Heathcliff leaves Wuthering Heights, under the impression that he needs to build himself into a better man who is worthy of her affections, having cast up his own walls in response to the cruel system that they will live in. His leaving breaks her so terribly that she falls ill, her shattered self cut on the broken pieces, believing herself to be the reason for all of his miseries, that if she simply did not exist, he would be happier. Thus was why she worked with N-Corp and the Ring Pointillism remnants, doing anything she can in an effort to relieve her lover of the anguish of her existence. But without her, Heathcliff is in heartbreak and agony, for she was the only one of that manner that made him feel as if he was human, as if he was worthy of love. With the thought of unworthiness, he seeks invulnerability within becoming rich and powerful himself to enact his revenge. With her death, he falls apart into an agonized man, a beast who only wishes destruction upon all that kept them apart. In the end, Catherine and Heathcliff both open up to each other far too late, right before her existence is wiped from all possibility by the bow. At least, in their parting, Heathcliff knows that she did indeed love him, but without Catherine, Heathcliff is no better off. Don Quixote, the father and first kindred of the Manchegan family, led a life of sloth holed up in his castle with his children sent off on occasion to help him find something fulfilling, but it would never do. Even a war raging between blood fiends and humans outside his doorstep wasn't something that provoked him, until the night of the white moon Bari came and filled him with dreams of becoming a fixer, and later founded La Mancha land after the war was over. But this was not him unfurling his walls, rather he traded seclusion for an escape as his fortress. If the family merely followed the footsteps of the dream, they did not have to be blood fiends anymore. They could be friends to humans. However, this denial of reality, of what they truly were, was what led to the downfall of close relations and the shattering of his heart. If he had minded the state of his children, he would have realized that blood made into sustenance was not enough for their natures. He made the crucial mistake of believing the life of a blood fiend and the life of a fixer should be separate, mutually exclusive instances. To deny your nature and the basic needs is to deny yourself true fulfillment. And so, withered and tormented, he could not reconcile within himself the possibility that he could be both. He relinquished his dream unto Sancho, now Don Quixote, to carry on and figure out on her own how she can manage this. Jia Mu was an older woman who previously stood as the head of the Jia family, amongst the major factions of H Corp's nest-dwelling families. Her unwavering ideology toward Huang Yuan's inability to change and the insistence that all who reside within it should simply lay down and play out their roles is a mark of her, and all who precede her, desire to be invulnerable. The insistence that the system she and generations before her cannot be challenged or changed, lest the whole thing collapses, in turn their desire to protect the district at all costs. No matter how much suffering and unfair treatment exists within the system, Jia Mu expects to all, and especially her grandson, to put up no resistance. To just be the precious jade and watch all of the sufferings unfold. Families fall onto tradition in order to maintain a sense of cycle and control. There has to have been some reason these things were kept in, even if the original reason is completely lost to time after all, right? The mere idea of desecrating such long-standing values because little children who should absolutely not know any better have begun asking questions or begging for the pain to stop is unthinkable. The idea of defying this order, especially after being completely altered by the Ananam worm's influence, is both terrifying and unthinkable to one such as Jia Mu, or even the elders within all their cruelty. The moment it is defied, however, is when Jia Mu cracks, and then finally shatters, because the maintaining of this rigidity and pleasing those who are a part of its storied upholding has become all that she is, all that she can't be, all that she will ever be, as the fear of losing control has trumped all else. Valencina, Rien, Matthias, Callisto, and Yoru, all of them of varying backgrounds and reasonings for ending up where they are, bear a single, unified kind of invulnerability, the inability to change their views. To be a parent, you have to be willing to be soft and flexible. You're under the guardianship of a fresh life that you will have no idea where they will be going in the future. And thus, you need to be able to change and turn around on your views or ideas in order to best suit your child's needs. Every child is different and requires this willingness to bend or see another angle. None of the Nursefathers, none of them, are willing to do this. Rather than try to figure out who Ryoshu wishes to be, they have collectively decided to press their own views and ideas onto her, a vain attempt at indoctrinating her one way or another into different ideas that will often cross or contradict one another. A ticket, a little daughter, a buddy, a student, or a fetter. Valencina's relationship with Ryoshu is a cross between clinging to her successful development so that she has a chance of leaving the House of Spiders to garner a third chance to be with her familia once more, yet also having a kind of regard for her that leads her to want her to toughen up through beatings and strictness, likely experiences she herself faced with whilst in the Thumber amongst conflicts. The reality is that she is a deeply traumatized and lost woman who puts up a facade of militaristic strength and aggression in order to reassert any form of control of her circumstances and poorly deal with her volatile emotions. But she never allows herself the vulnerability to deviate from the strong persona. She suffers from her own stagnation by drowning out her woes with alcohol and aggressively preparing anyone she is charged with for whatever role they're meant to partake, as if she is still in the myriad of conflicts lived throughout her life. Rienne's relationship with Ryoshu is both the uncompromising direction by Hermes' hand to make her into the Blade, and also his playing dad to cope with the fact he allowed his wife and child to die in front of him so many years ago. He unflinchingly maintains his obligation to fulfilling his god's wishes no matter how many people are hurt, killed, or are set up to be either. Because the following of the prescripts is the only constant in his life, the only thing he can depend on, feeling a gratitude towards them. Despite his trauma, the prescripts have yet again enabled him to be a father to another little girl, and he cannot stop being a father to a little girl. Even as Ryoshu is a grown woman who has literally left him with a permanent wound and intends to kill him with no mixed feelings, he still speaks to her as if she was still a small child, because his original daughter was little when she died. He cannot falter from this role because he cannot imagine a life with Ryoshu past her being little. If she becomes the blade, then she can be his little girl forever, as a mindless, unkillable flurry trapped within the halls of the House of Spiders. In turn, he also failed to really give Ryoshu any real understanding of him. He has never opened up to the point she thinks he's devoid of real feelings, when that's the furthest from the truth. Thus is why, in the end, when Ryoshu has left him and has no reason to return, he departs and ends his own life. Matthias' relationship with Ryoshu leans very much into objectification. Ryoshu is not a child to him. Ryoshu is his little buddy. She's someone he can be performatively a parent with, while never taking up any of the real responsibilities of what that role means. It's, in a way, his, and frankly a symptom of every middle member's inability to grow up and mature. He only thinks of Ryoshu's needs in an egocentric way, what he would desire, with no consideration of how she feels about it. Merely an idea put on display on his shelves, much like his unsealed toys. Callisto's relationship with Ryoshu is quite similar in regard to Matthias's, although with more of an edge of insecurity about his art. He imposes his works and techniques upon Ryoshu from a young and impressionable age, despite how little she desires to witness it. And even as she aged and got used to being exposed to his fragile attempts at validation, she still did not grow a real taste for corpism in specific. He needed her to validate his artistic touch, as that validation is all he has left from keeping the walls of his ego. That his art form still has merit despite reality being of the contrary. And finally, Yoru's relationship with Ryoshu is strained from the fact she was chained down and forced to bear and raise her in specific, unable to be free as she desires. Instead of realizing that both of them are, in reality, prisoners of the house, she uses Ryoshu as a means to spit all of her vitriol onto, as she cannot do the same to the person she truly wants to brutalize. In another life, maybe they could have conspired together to break out, but in the end, Yoru remained resentful of her freedom being ripped away from her, taking it out on her blood daughter. All of the Nursefathers, all of them present with this uncompromising mind's inability to change or wish to change. Araya was a young girl brought to the House of Spiders by Ryoshu, unknowingly to become a new fetter for her. But rather than be something keeping her chained down, she was Ryoshu's primary motivator in escaping. Ryoshu left her in the safe with full intent on returning to reclaim her once she had the means to do so. However, Ryoshu would be unaware that Araya had exited the safe long before she even had the chance to return, as a fear had overtaken her. What if her mother forgot about her? By Rien's exploitation of her fears, she would become the Pinky Nursefather, with the hopes she would see her mother again. And she does, but she doesn't open up. Her fears of abandonment have in turn provoked her to become invulnerable. She feels the need to test Ryoshu to see if even in her current form her mother would recognize her. And she doesn't. And so her fear overtakes her and pushes her to seal herself shut. In her mind, her mother, not immediately recognizing her, even with Ren's prodding, was sufficient proof that her fears were true. But even so, she doesn't fully give up. She keeps pushing Ryoshu, venting her own fears in layered language, testing her until she simply couldn't take it anymore. When Ryoshu stabs her, she begins to split. She starts pouring out all of her frustrations and fears, and only by exposing this raw truth does she reach her mother, but only manages to accomplish this far too late. Dying on the ground, her entangled self sliced up so many times that she now can witness many different lives, and in every single one of these lives she realizes her mother always comes back. Ryoshu always manages to find her. Ryoshu always chooses her. And thus, she allows herself to be vulnerable. She allows herself to be forgotten, for now at least, with newfound hope in her heart that her mother will one day find her again, as she always does. At least she can be by her side and help her, for now. Commitment, retribution, salvation, dominance, pragmatism, dogmatism, prestige, escapism, tradition, intransigence, and apprehension. These are the walls that each antagonistic figure throughout Project Moon's works have erected in order to protect themselves. But these walls are what separates them from others. They're what prevents them from finding true fulfillment and connection with others. I know that connecting with others is terrifying. The idea of opening yourself up and being hurt anyway is terrifying. But that's exactly what makes it worth it. If you're hurt by someone for being true and genuine with them, it's not your fault. It's their fault for refusing to be vulnerable. Never blame yourself for opening the doors to your heart. You are the one trying. There are 8 billion people in this world. If you're at a period in your life where you feel like you're alone or everyone in your life is terrible to you, there is someone out there for you, I promise. I truly do promise. But you need to look. You need to be willing to feel the hurt of rejection or misunderstanding or even mistakes. Because if you can survive that, then your world will be all the richer. Because we are all soft and yearning for companionship, whether we like it or not. It's how we even got this far. Whether you open the way or the walls you've made are cracked, the light will find its way in. It's what makes us human.